Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for continuing to support my channel. Hey everybody, this is Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews, and it's the first of the month, which means it is time for my monthly to-be-read list. So let's just get right down into it, starting with Winter Solstice, part of the Wandering Inn series. This is by pirateaba. I'm reading this in book form. Should be finished with this around the 4th of this month. I've already been reading it for a little bit. It is 261,000 words, coming in at a little over 1,100 pages, 1,109. And I am predicting that I'm going to give this a 5-star rating, and I'm just about confident that I'm going to do that for a lot of reasons. Mostly because the first 3 books that I've read in the series were all 5 out of 5s. And what I've read so far, and we're about 50% in, is also a 5 out of 5. So I just love this series so much. I almost feel like embarrassed about it because of the perceptions that the series has with everybody. I speak to a darker crowd. I speak to more of like an epic fantasy crowd that likes to read like really adult fantasy series. And when you look at this series, it looks like it's childish. It's like a web serial. So people already, talk negatively about those. But and I think I did include it before I read this, and it's just incredible. Everything about this should appeal to epic fantasy fans. It's amazing. I love everything about it, and I just am continually impressed by how skillful this author is to weave so many type of like subgenres into one cohesive story, and it's incredible because there's no editor here. This is just one person going off and writing an insane amount. So yeah, if you're looking for a series that you can just get sucked into, and that you're like, you want to read like a huge series, this is the one for you. I was talking to somebody earlier today who was asking for a recommendation on what to read after Cradle. And they said they drive for a long time and they want an audiobook. I hear the audiobook for these are great. And you are going to buy these books for super cheap, and they're like, 30 plus hours each on Audible. So yeah, check those out. They're incredible, but I'm reading the physical books, and those are incredible too. They're only like $3.99 a pop, or you can just read them for free on the website. So at thewanderinginn.com. So check that out. The next book that I will be finishing up this month is The Stand by Stephen King. I'll be doing this on audiobook, and I should finish this around the 5th of the month. And I feel like I've been reading this book forever. It's enormous. It's 1,400 pages, 471,000 words, and I listen to audiobooks way less than I read physical books. And with my new job, my commute is like halved. And then in a week or so, it's going to be, halved again. And so I just don't listen to audiobooks as much as I used to. And so it's taken me, honestly, probably like 4 weeks from the start to finish of this, which is nuts. But I like it. I liked the first Stephen King book I read. I think it was like 11/22/63. I could be off on that, but I know there's a 63 in there. And I always wanted to read this one first, but the other one got recommended to me on my Patreon account for what book I should read that month. But so I picked this one up, and I like a lot about it. I love the plot. The plot's amazing. It sucks you in. It just took a really, really, really long time for the plot to really get moving. And I'm talking like 700 pages of just setup. And that's crazy. I mean, that's crazy for Stephen King. So, I'm coming to like a lot of things about Stephen King. I'm kind of dislike some others. Ultimately, I like his stuff. And yeah, I'm predicting I'll get a 4 out of 5 out of this. That's kind of where I'm at right now, but I think the ending will dictate whether that goes up or goes down or stays the same. But I'm guessing 4 out of 5. The next book that I will be reading is Of Blood and Fire, part of the Bound and the Broken series by Ryan Cahill. I'll be reading this in book format, and I should be finishing this up around the 9th of February. This is a bit smaller. This is only 543 pages, coming at 168,000 words, and I'm predicting that I'm going to be giving this a 4 out of 5. I normally would say like 5 out of 5 for this because of how much hype goes around it, and I legitimately haven't heard any negative things about this. I love epic fantasy, but I've read a lot of self-published authors, and which is what this one is, I believe. And it's really hit and miss. So I'm hoping this is more in the hit category, but I've intentionally kept myself from knowing anything about this. I haven't even read the blurb. I just know that eventually I was going to read it. I planned on reading this in a couple months, but again, this is a Patreon pick. This was what was in the raffle. So if you're part of the Patreon, everybody selects a book or two depending on your tier, and I spin the wheel at the end of the month, and this one won. So I'm reading it, and I'm looking forward to it. The next is The Grey Bastards. This is part of the Lotland series by Jonathan French. I'll be doing this one on audiobook. Should be finishing this one around February 16th. Again, this is on the smaller side. It's 529 pages, coming in at 155,000 words. And I'm predicting a 5 out of 5 on this. I debated whether a 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5, but I've been looking forward to reading this for so long. I haven't actually had a ton of recommendations for the series before. I feel like I found out about it like well over a year ago, and I was Googling around for like what grimdark fantasy have I not read yet, because virtually every grimdark fantasy that I've ever read, I've absolutely loved. Now, I don't know how grimdark this is, but it certainly comes up that way in Goodreads when I look for it, and that's how I found out about it. And so I don't know much about this other than I believe that it's non-human characters is the point of views. I think they're orcs. And yeah, I'm always on the lookout for like darker books. The darker, the better. I'm not talking like horror here. I'm talking about like dark, grimdark fantasy. And yeah, I love that thing so much. You know, there's so much heroic fantasy out there, you know, the Brandon Sanderson type books that I also love. But it feels like the grimdark stuff, you know, kind of hit its peak, you know, 5 or 10 years ago. And I'm kind of catching up to how good it is. Because I love this, you know, idea that you don't know where the story's going to go. You don't know who's going to die off. You don't know anything. There's so much left that you can't predict the ending to these things. And I love being surprised so much. So I'm looking forward to it. The next is going to be The Wise Man's Fear. This is part of the Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss. I'll be reading this in book format. Should be finishing this up around February 22nd. This is a long one. This is 395,000 words and 1,100 pages. And I'm going to predict a 4 out of 4. And I'm going to predict a 4 out of 4 because I've already read this. I read this book 8 years ago on my honeymoon. And I was in Maui. It was awesome. I have very fond memories of this book. And I tore through both of the Kingkiller books, reading it on the beaches, and very fond memories. But I gave it a 4 out of 5 at the time. So I'm going to predict the same thing. Now, I just finished reading not a few months back now, probably like, 6 or so months ago, I read The Name of the Wind again, and I loved it. Gave it a 5 out of 5. But I recall a lot of problems in this book, and some odd choices that the author made. I mean, there was a long section with like this weird fae sex scenes that were just bizarre. You know, I'm not opposed to sex scenes in my books. I don't shy away from anything, but it just felt weird and not having much to do with the plot other than Rothfuss wanting to, you know, get it out onto paper. But that wasn't my only problem with it. But I do love the writing style. That's my favorite thing about these books. The plots are never great in these books, but the writing is just so good. But so maybe I'll give it a 5 out of 5 and I'll up it, but we'll see. And then the final book that I will be reading in this month is The Grace of Kings. This is part of the Dandelion Dynasty, and this is from Ken Liu. And I'll be reading this in book format. Should finish it up around February 27th. And this is 164,000 words. Is this the shortest one? No, it's not. It's close though. And it's 656 pages. And I'm going to predict a 4 out of 5. This was another Patreon pick. You know what? I lied earlier. The first one of Blood and Fire was I put up a bunch of books I want to read and people vote on them. This one, The Grace of Kings, was the one that was selected by a viewer. And I think that was Shad that selected that one. And I'm going 4 out of 5 on this, even though the hype is enormous. There's more hype around this one than any of the books on my list. And that I don't want to like call out any names, but you know, some reviewers that I really like have loved this book, more than one. And lately, the super hyped up books that are like over the top hyped, I haven't really been loving them from these reviewers. And so I'm hoping that those were anomalies and that there's not some trend here. But I am excited about it. I'm excited about all these books. You know, my predicted score this month is 4.33. And that's a high predicted score for me. And I am also admittedly more optimistic on things and in life in general. But so yeah, we'll see. I don't know anything about it other than I do know that it's based on historical accounts, but it's on history that I don't already know. Now, one of my biggest problems with the Poppy War is I was intimately familiar with the history that it was copying, I want to say, because it was like straight up history, and it made it less enjoyable for me because I knew kind of everything that was going to happen. Now, I don't know this one, so yeah, I bet it's going to be great. I bet that it's going to be higher than my predicted score. So the average word count for books this month is 269,000, which is enormous. My average page length is 905. And to give you some like context here, my average page length over life on fantasy is 511. So this is like almost double that. So that's kind of crazy. And yeah, I can't wait to report back and give you the reviews to these 6 books. So, as always, thank you so much for watching and happy reading to you. Thanks again to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Sky, Russell, Ron Reich, Romeo Mike, CJ, and my book is lit.